That's right, it's time for the video game edition of William Designs, or as I like to call it, the DLC MLG 360 XX No Scope Gamer Mode episode. I started my gaming journey with perhaps the best console to ever exist, the iPod Touch, which means I was raised on the streets of Jetpack Joyride, Fruit Ninja, Doodle Jump, Geometry Dash, Clash of Clans, which, no, I did not rush to a Town Hall 10 because it looked cool. Don't judge me, okay? Plants vs. Zombies, and Minecraft Pocket Edition Lite, where you had to build this whole nuclear reactor in order to go to the Nether for some reason. Then I graduated to the Wii, which caused endless arguments between my brother and I, simply because I was better than him at Mario Kart, Wii Sports, Mario and Sonic at the Olympic Games, and basically everything else. But I can't help that I'm built different when it comes to motion games, Brooks. Also, sorry that I broke your teeth in half that one time. All of this to say, when I became a man, I was shaped in the perfect way to be obsessed with the world and culture of gaming. And a lot of this came in phases, like my Minecraft and Terraria phase, my Markiplier, Jacksepticeye, and PewDiePie era, where I watched people play games, my Pokemon phase, my Five Nights at Freddy's phase, that one time I played Binding of Isaac for like 800 hours, the other time, my two friends and I played Black Ops 3 game lobbies and actually practiced to play competitively, only to lose every search and destroy game we played because I didn't have the dexterity to compete. My Cool Math Games era, which only occurred on the school computers when I should have been studying the Byzantine Empire or something like that. But you guys read the title, you know the vibe. I'm going to be making a few 3D posters for my favorite video games. If you don't like these games or don't agree with me that they are masterpieces in their class, then that's your opinion, but you're also incredibly wrong. So. Years ago, I heard whispers about this game, a Metrovania that's as hard as Dark Souls. Impossible. But little did I know that jumping into that tiny hole for the first time would start an addiction I will never break, because Silksong, the sequel to Hollow Knight, will never come out, at least in my lifetime. Which means I'm stuck trying to do all of the impossible challenges that Team Cherry left us. Basically, this game is grand and also extremely difficult, which does make it extremely rewarding when you've been stuck on a boss for literal days, only to realize that you then have to fight the actual sun. Seriously though, from the extremely unique buggy art style to the actual scope of the game itself, Hollow Knight deserves every bit of praise it has ever received. It's truly an indie game masterpiece and extremely inspiring to me as an artist as well. For the poster, I want to lean into this inspiring art style by creating a more realistic version of the Hollow Knight. I also want to place him in one of my favorite areas, the City of Tears, to really lean into the atmosphere of the game as a whole. To create the knight, I'm starting with the sphere that I can then sculpt to create the horns of our dear little warrior. Then I can use a Boolean modifier to make those perfect circles to give our Hollow Knight some hollow eyes. Thankfully, this little knight lacks any sort of real body, which saves me quite a lot of time. So I'm going to create a flowing cape to give the poster some much needed life and movement. To do this, I'm using a cloth modifier alongside a wind force thingy. Basically, this will blow the cloth, giving it that beautiful cape-like quality that we're going for. This really does feel like magic every time that I use one of these little force things, even though it almost destroys my computer every single time. As you'll see behind me here, I tend to work a little backwards from a typical 3D workflow. I like to add textures, lighting, and little items really early on to get a better idea of what I like and what I don't like. A good example is the rain here. Obviously, I don't need to add the rain to this scene yet, but again, just gives me the flexibility to see where I'm at and what I want to change later down the line. That's really how art works though. We, as artists, can get inspired from the smallest things, then steal ideas from those things in order to incorporate it to create new art. For example, you'll see that behind me here, I'm creating these skyscraper things from the game to add to the poster. I wanted these to feel massive from the camera's point of view, all because I got inspired when my wife and I visited New York over Thanksgiving. This was my first time in the city, and it was truly incredible how small you felt when you're surrounded by these huge skyscrapers. And no, this is not an excuse for me to share photos from our trip with you. We were truly defying gravity the entire time. It's the dumbest joke. But once I had those in place, I added some free Gothic bridges and towers that I found online to give the poster a real sense of scale. I also added some little nails and lamps to the foreground to provide some interest there as well. When it comes to these posters, I tend to think of them in terms of layers. So in the front, we have the nails and the lamps that give it that good sense of foreground. Then comes our dear little knight, of course, that acts as the main point to draw the eye. Then comes the background, where you can really establish that good sense of scale that I've been going for. For example, adding this little bridge here all the way in the back can really make you question where this bridge leads or goes to. Or I sure hope it does. It also looks cooler with this added, so there's that too. Finally, I can add some fog to the scene, a little particle system of glowing boys to add some extra interest, and of course that ever-important statue that stands at the center of the City of Tears. Oh, I also created the little nail sword for our knight as well. For the animation, I'm using a mutant breathing animation from Mixamo, which is actually a free library of a ton of different 3D animations you can use in your project, all courtesy of our evil overlords at Adobe, of course. I love Mixamo just because it can kind of lower the barrier to entry that 3D animation often lacks. 3D animation is super overwhelming, so having any kind of foundation to build off of is super helpful. Finally, I'll add some final adjustments, color grade the heck out of this in After Effects, add some much needed texture, and with that, we have a completed 3D Hollow Knight poster. I don't care what you say, Pokemon is incredible, and Pokemon Emerald specifically holds a very special place in my heart. It all started one fateful day in the back of my 7th grade math class, where little Will, who was supposed to be learning fractions and decimals, decided to pull out his iPod Touch, and instead of playing Cookie Clicker for the next hour and a half, I decided to download an emulator where I could play these old school Pokemon games for the first time. For little William, this was revolutionary, and Pokemon Emerald is probably the reason I'm not very good at fractions now, or at least that's like 3/8 of the reason. But past my own love for this special game, Pokemon Emerald was part of Generation 3 of the Pokemon games, which many argue is to be the best generation as a whole. Now, I know this can be a hot topic, but all I really want to say is that Generation 3 easily had the most consistently solid Pokemon designs, such as Egg with Eyes, or do I even need to say what this looks like? I don't think I do. For the poster, I'm going back to my first love, dioramas. Specifically, since Pokemon Emerald has so many water-esque Pokemon, I want to create an underwater scene with a bunch of different Pokemon swimming around. This is also an excuse to create some of my favorite little critters in 3D, so I'm pumped. Before I create a million different Pokemon, I want to get a good foundation of this ocean scene. This includes creating a sandy floor, some water caustics to give that good ocean feel, and a little border to help me visualize where these little guys will eventually end up. Now comes the Pokemon extravaganza. I just now realized how much footage I recorded of this process. So I'm gonna try my best to speed this up a little bit and make it digestible for you. Are you ready to see the best 3D modeling of your life? Because this might be it. Maybe. Probably not, but it might be. Whalmer is basically a sphere with fins and teeth, so I added a sphere and added some fins and teeth. I also made him relatively large because whale. Lileep is a flower-looking guy, making him the perfect Pokemon for some foliage. For him, I used some spears and curves in order to create the more organic pieces. Then I just tried my best to make it look like Lileep. That's about it. Clamperl, on the other hand, was a process. In order to make this happen, I extruded and beveled specific sections of a cylinder in order to create that geometric shell. Then I made his pearl-shaped head and whatever weird body thing this was. Barboach was born from a sculpted cylinder, some scaled-down circle fins, a sculpted face, and curved whiskers. Truly a cutie pie, if I had to say so myself. I do want to take a brief moment to explain how I'm painting these guys. Essentially, I'm using a mixed texture node to combine two textures together. Then I'm using an image texture on top of that to basically tell Blender that I want this spot to be painted and this spot to not be painted. Then I just paint on top of the models. It's pretty cool. Love Disc sucks. I hate this thing. Gulpin was made with a combination of spheres in order to make a blob-like creature. This guy has always given me big Design by Hade vibes. Corphish was definitely the hardest Pokemon I had to create. But once I had the overall body shape down, I used a number of spheres and solidify modifiers in order to create the claws and feet. From there, it all kind of came together. And honestly, I'm super proud of how this little dude came out. Finally, I made a little nose pass. We'll be diving into the scene because you can't have Pokemon Emerald without the best Pokemon to ever exist. I love you, Nose Pass. You deserve the world. I also made him some little goggles. Look at this stud. Now comes the fun part, putting all these little guys into the scene. From the sweeping vistas, unique boss designs, and endless amount of explorable content, Elden Ring is probably the most epic game ever created. But it's also extremely difficult, which does make me feel a little bit better about the hundreds of hours that I put into this game, even though I was very bad. There are very, very, very few games that gave me the sense of escape that Elden Ring did. For a few months there, I was William the Samurai, slaying every beast in my path, instead of being William the Senior Digital Marketing Analyst, analyzing every piece of data in my path. You see the appeal here? Even with all of my love for this game, I really struggled with creating a poster. I think I was trying too hard to make something good or perfect, instead of creating art for the sake of creating it. Now, I do want to say that this isn't my most favorite poster ever, and I really struggle with putting something out there that looks so incomplete and unfinished in my head. But I have to remind myself that this is all part of the process, and this is how I grow as well. I believe it was Teddy Roosevelt who said, "It's all about the journey, not the destination, Mr. William Designs." He was a big fan of the channel, apparently. So, what's the main idea here? Well, I actually want to take Elden Ring and sort of flip it on its head a bit by creating a cartoon version of my main character. While I absolutely adore the art style of Elden Ring, I also love taking source material and placing it in my own style. So we're going to do just that. I'm going to start this process off by creating my character. One of the coolest parts about Elden Ring is that you can pick any class or character that you want to be. So of course, I picked one of the most overpowered builds at the time, a samurai with dual katanas. I do have a confession though, I rushed to the Rivers of Blood katana super early on, which is this crazy sword that does a whole lot of damage, and it kind of ruined all sense of challenge that I would have had. But before you get mad at me, I did beat the whole game without any summons at all, which means I'm basically a real-life gamer. Nearly killed her. Also, the samurai armor in the game is beautiful, so I want to try to replicate that here. But of course, this is a more cartoon version, so I'm focusing on bigger shapes and bigger details to capture the overall look of the armor. This means starting with blocky shapes like cylinders for the arms and legs, a deformed sphere for the body, and even more cylinders for the skirt and armored panels. I love stretching shapes. Well, once I have a good foundation in place, I can go back through and sculpt to make sure the pants look like pants and that the armor looks like armor. Then, with the magic of Blender Kit, I'll import a few katanas to make our little guy a certified killing machine. Blender Kit is an incredible add-on to Blender where 3D artists can share their models with the world. And I'm so thankful they do, because these are models that I could never create. For our little background here, I'm using the same gothic towers and bridges from the Hollow Knight poster to really frame out our little warrior. I'll also add an emission texture to the windows to give some nice ambient lighting. In a poster like this, I'm always trying to focus on lighting and how it can elevate the scene, which is why I have so many different colors and lighting types, like a blue sun that hits all of the objects at once, or the orange lighting all the way in the very back here that gives it that nice little glow, or the yellow lighting right behind the character to make sure he stands out with the busy background that's going on. Finally, I'll add some nice foliage throughout the scene, some grain effects and little texture effects in Photoshop, as well as some minor color adjustments. And with that, we have our completed tribute to the best Elden Ring character ever created, William the Samurai. And with that, the video gamer mode moment of William Designs has finally come to an end. As always, I hope you enjoyed this journey that we went on together. These posters were incredibly fun for me to create, specifically the Pokemon one. I haven't had that much fun creating in quite a while. Also, thank you so much for all of the kind words and encouragement. The amount of support has been truly overwhelming for me, and I just feel very thankful that I get to do this alongside you. I hope that these videos inspire you to create your own art, whatever that looks like, and that art inspires others. And then they make art that inspires others, all because you watched a William Designs video. Mm-hmm.